So welcome to the Cayley Institute, and I'm here with Arturo Martinini talking about his recent work with astrological talismanic magic and artificial intelligence, neural networks, image creation. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is cool. Very exciting. Very exciting to be here. This space is it's very special. It feels really great to be in a place with this much paper.
Yeah.
Talking about the most immaterial, digital, stuff that also happened to be turned into a book and all that. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Well, you're our first live guest, so that's really cool as well. Which is interesting given the lack of embodiment of artificial intelligence. And you worked specifically with a program called Midjourney, which is explain what Midjourney is. How did you get involved with this tool?
Yeah. So I and some friends of mine have been working on the, let's call it like artistic project side of utilizing artificial intelligence for creating stuff. Let's just keep it generic for now. And we got into it on the very early side. So back when it was rather complicated actually to figure out the technology, and it was not at all user friendly. Okay. Our good friend Anthony was smart enough to figure out how to make some of this stuff work, and so we were able to experiment and play around with some very basic stuff. I don't know if you remember this website called This Person Does Not Exist.
No.
Yeah, it was we were like a little team of 3 people. It's me, Nathan, and Anthony.
Yeah.
And Nathan was got kind of obsessed with that because it really was an incredible idea. So the website was just a page that you just refreshed.
Yeah.
And every time you refresh the page, it would show a picture of a person.
Weird.
That looked very much like a person, but it was not a real person. It was AI.
Oh my God.
And so that was like a very early.
So you were creating deep fakes, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. It was just a hit refresh, get a deep fake website. And
that's like Hot or Not. Do you remember that website?
No.
Oh my God, I'm dating myself right now. In the 90s, there was one of these websites where you would just like scroll and there'd be just an image of a person and you just rate the person hot or not.
Oh, gotcha. This was even less opinionated than that.
Okay.
I mean, it really is just like
that would take it to the next level though. Like you're evaluating the attractiveness
like fake
of
hot or not. Yeah, I guess you could put a hot or not filter over the fake people, and then okay. I'm sure people get confused a lot nowadays if you are doing that, if you're like engaging with that kind of activity online. Sure. So as far as we can tell, there's probably a lot of fake people that you're getting attracted to. Yeah.
So how did magic come into play?
Yeah, so that was the first step, and so we tried to figure out what the technology was, that made that possible, and one thing led to another. And as we were exploring, really janky ways to make this work, like we didn't have the proper technology, so we scrapped together some money to like get the proper thing to make it work, blah blah. And when by the time we were able to get something out of it, the culture was kind of catching on. So we were kind of like, there was already an aspect of serendipity to it, right? Because we got attracted to something that wasn't necessarily in the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And as we were trying to figure it out, the zeitgeist was getting started.
Okay.
And Midjourney was very much one of the absolute earliest zeitgeist pieces, that made this possible for people that did not have the technical background to make it work. Because what Midjourney really is a chatbot. Okay. That you can interact with on Discord. And the chatbot is an interface to the very complicated model that creates the images. We can get into technical details, but I don't know how useful that is. But in short, what Midjourney is a text to image neural network. And so what that means is that the technology, what it does is that, imagine it starts with something like noise. And a good analogy for that is when you look at clouds in the sky, right? And you are trying to superimpose images on the clouds. When you say that cloud looks like something, but then another person sees another thing in it, imagine the cloud being the noise. So everything starts with the cloud. And then by texting something, right, by writing something up, such as an image of a turtle, right? The neural network will utilize a data set of images, meaning something like the internet, right? To figure out the closest proximity to the shape of a turtle and condense the noise into something approximating a turtle. And so that technology was very very weird and kind of uncanny at first, and then it gotten better and better as the new versions of Midjourney kept updating.
Very cool.
So if you prompted a turtle when we got started with Midjourney,
you'd really, get like a space turtle.
Yeah, you really have to. Yeah, you have to work a little, with your imagination to really see a turtle in there. And now we've gotten to like perfect photorealistic, like near impossible to tell. Difference, like quality in some cases, especially if it's something realistic like that.
Wow.
But that very weird, chaotic, uncanny quality at the beginning of the technology is actually what was conducive to the connection with magic, because it was for me, like personally, at that time, I was just engaging with astrological magic literature, and me and my friend Nathan both did the Christopher Warnock course on astrological magic, and so we were just getting started, exploring for the first time these let's call them the traditional ancient texts of astrology magic, Picatrix, and so on.
Agrippa,
Ficino, and as Warnock is very keen on the Renaissance revival of astrology, so it was translations from that time specifically that we were engaging with, which is relevant actually to why this came about, because when you read those translations, some of them really are rather bizarre, like semantically, and you gotta wonder, like, wait a second, like, is this really
a man hanging upside down with a second face?
And it's all very literal and it's very basic, right? Like it has a children's book almost, like quality to it, because it's just the basic descriptions of stuff that you have to create in a relatively short amount of time. And so part of it is probably that, because
when you say create in a short amount of time, you're talking about working the operation through the planetary hour,
actually making talismans. So these we are talking, anything that we're talking about is in the context of these, let's call them instructions, right? Like those are like indications and instructions on how to go about making a physical talisman or a sigil, right? The kind of, and it can be all kinds of things. It can be a pendant, it can be a little statuette, there's all kinds of different traditions. But the instructions are just this dry, very literal, little passages that says, make the image of a turtle with a man sitting on top of it holding a golden chain or something like that.
And then how are you supposed to make that attractive when you only have 45 minutes in the wintertime, right? Like, that's the question.
It's kind of because there are some examples of talismans, that from antiquity that are rather attractive and beautiful, and and then of course, if you get down the rabbit hole of like how to make stuff, there's all kinds of amazing things that you can learn, like practically. And so, but anyway, the space in which these two things intersected, the technology and the tradition, was precisely in this weird space of, these are translations of translations of translations of translations through millennia.
So a little like what the neural network is doing with its image.
Precisely. So we made that connection very early, that these is the same game. Like we're if you are to engage with it in the same way, you very much can position yourself to become a contributor to the tradition, rather than say someone that's mocking it or making a parody, which could very easily happen, right? Because one could argue, you take something like Midjourney and then you type up something very basic, right? Such as the image of a medieval talisman. Right. So you can type that up, and
did you do that?
I did.
What came out?
Well, something very generic that looked more like a prop from a movie, more than anything else, because
it was being fed those things. No, like
well, it I think what happens with those models is if there's a lack of knowledge and introspection, basically they very quickly default to abundance, right, of references. And so like if say that Marvel, right, has put out a bunch of movies recently that have like fantasy items in it, right? There's going to be an overabundance of those imagery, like online. And so, if you're not careful with what you want, it's just going to go find the closest proxy, right? And give you something pretty generic.
Right.
And that's something that, I've been kind of like, reflecting on recently. And it's a huge part of why these worked in a sense, which is realizing that, the conversation around artificial intelligence and technology in general, kind of, especially when you are trying to put it in the context of comparing it to spiritual practices and metaphysical practices, right? The tendency is always to create some kind of dichotomy that has a spectrum, right? That goes from very material and physical and analog and digital, right? And it feels to me like a popular pattern is that the closer you get to the digital part of the spectrum, the less pure or legitimate or serious or involved and personal an experience you're getting when working in the metaphysical and the occult and the magical. And then the closer you get to the physical and the real, the more legit and powerful and real it is and all that stuff. But the reality is that with these models really do have a profound understanding of semantics and specific things. And so I found actually that it's near impossible to master this technology without a profoundly introspective and internalized process that has to happen before delegating it to this very externalized technology. Because again, one might be tempted to say, oh, artificial intelligence is hyper externalized, right? Like human behaviors, right? You take everything that's human and then you like literally put it in a box, and you let it play out something like an emulation of being human, right? Or at least that's the in fiction, right? Primarily, and maybe in some areas of philosophy. Granted, I'm not an expert in either of those fields, and I can't really give you like a full analysis, but it seems to me like a lot of those dialogues in the public sphere kind of tend to gravitate around those principles, right? Which is artificial intelligence is it's like this simulacrum of humanity, right? And there's this weird tendency that we have to keep externalizing ourselves until we are going to disappear and the machines are going to take over, something like that. So there's
dystopian
right, like
melding of all humankind into one big brain,
pretty much. There's all kinds of flavors to that narrative, but there is very much a narrative that people are setting a lot of the expectations on when engaging with this technology. But doing this pretty much reassured me of the opposite, which is I think that and I'm not alone in this by any stretch of the imagination. I picked this up also in other areas, and like talking to other people that are also interested in like let's say philosophizing about it, right? Or like at least intellectualizing the process. It seems to me like this is a process that we as a species and as a culture have been engaging with actually for much longer than we have not. Like this concept that you, in order to achieve things in life, or at the very least to acquire a higher perspective, or having more agency over your destiny, or and enhancing some aspects of yourself and elevating yourself, all of these had to go through interactions with transhuman beings and hyperhuman beings and gods and spirits and all. I mean, those interactions were very much baked in our culture for the longest time, and in a very short amount of time, we can say, and we can conveniently call it modernity, even though I I'm gonna be careful with that because
said the M word.
I know. I want to be very careful with that because I'm very limited in describing these things like ontologically. So I don't want to like make it too black and white of a thing. But it sounds to me like the period during which we have during which these things have fallen out of practice, let's say socially and anthropologically, is relatively short compared to the rest of it, right? Where these things again were like in a way or another, right? Granted, there has been cycles for everything, and like some cults, right, have fallen out of grace, and some cults have taken over, and so that kind of overlapping of spiritual preferences probably felt like the same at the time, right? One could imagine.
Well, we have this like hidden religion of rationality, which is a different kind of worship. It's not of a god per se, but then AI brings it full circle to an extent.
Very much.
It sort of uses the code to get us back to this contact with a super transhuman entity.
Yes, you hear a lot about mind, right? A lot of personalities end up talking about mind as a spiritual entity and ultimately as a real god, right? That governs very specific principles that are very appealing to, say, the rational types and so on, and which is fine. It's just not it's not going to be a dialogue that you're going to hear very, very often, right? To think of those things as another iteration of spiritual evolution rather than a simple narrative of first there was this and then this came and replaced it, right? Because we tend to think about it like that, where there used to be spirituality and religion and then came science or something like that, and now,
I mean, religion can only exist if you have a non-religious mode, and if everything's religion, you don't actually acknowledge it as religion because it's just what you do.
And what I mean to say really is that I feel like any simplified dichotomy of like one time versus another doesn't seem to be very constructive when sorting out a phenomenon like this in a way that can ultimately be useful and inspiring and integrated and utilized in personal explorations of the metaphysical specifically. So there's a couple of things that are interesting to me. One is it seems to be very much maybe for the first time a real system of divination that is accessible to non-initiates. And there's a lot that comes with that, right? There's great potential and of course a lot to be worried about because the gating, right, of the initiated knowledge and how to properly interact with divination was foundational almost to keep society in balance. If you really think about some parts of history that way, where it's like the figure of the priest and the figure of the king.
It's a vocation. You're called to be that translator of the messages.
Right. Like someone's role is going to be very specifically be in charge of that knowledge, and passing it on is something very specific that needs to happen in very specific ways. Now, if you are in tune with the patterns of astrology and you wanna create an analysis for the planetary placements that characterizes our times, I feel like the community is pretty unanimously agreeing that these are times of extreme proliferation of the metaphysical tradition in ways that is kind of hard to create analogies with, like back in history, maybe just because the worldview of people was so radically different and just in tune with this idea that everything is animate on it, like ultimately. And so now we have this new perspective in the game, which is not a mild disagreement, but a very strong, opposite view, which is no, everything is inanimate and doesn't have any meaning, and it's purely coincidental and blah blah blah, right? So to reconciliate the two seems to be one of the most important things to do if you are, you know, willing to put in a lot of personal time in creating a nuanced, you know, perspective on the dialogue. And I think engaging with this technology and thinking about it this way really can be very helpful. And personally, having created, you know, enough material to fill a book with has been, has confirmed some of those intuitions, at least on the personal experience side.
Yeah. So here's the book.
Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
When you open the front, it actually gets you into some kind of temple space on the inside, and then full color working through all the images. And then at the end, you kind of leave. It's like an exhaustion of sort of like, okay, we just did how much? Okay, so, and then the back cover has this sort of box, like man in the box, in itself a meta reference to the exact physicality of the book itself. But you've chosen 4 kinds of astrological image, sort of the 7 traditional planets, the 15 Behenian fixed stars mentioned in Agrippa and used a lot in Warnock's work and astrological magic. And the Behenian fixed stars have their own reason why they're in a cluster, right? Like there's so many fixed stars, but for some reason this set has chosen to be grouped together and mentioned as a cohort. I guess it's like a clique of stars, you could say. And then you've got the 28 lunar mansions and the 36 decans. So all told, it's 86 images that you created. But you also asked the AI, it looks like, to create a codex page for each image, so that, you know, this would be this this image of, say that one.
Like, just read what
does she say?
A seated woman holding her right hand above her head, dressed in clothes.
But it's the 3rd lunar mansion and its name is
Azoraya,
right? So the codex page looks like this, and then the image that it produced in response to the prompt was this, right?
Yes.
And so on each side you have this AI codex, right, which I find fascinating, that it was creating sort of your version of an old book with scribbles and little diagrams and such. So can you talk about, like, how did you come up with the codex page with all of this type of image magic that you see here versus the actual, like, talismanic image?
Yes, cool. Yeah, that's a great question. All right, so actually, I guess it's important to frame, you know, like why this worked for me. So I legitimately don't I can't really think of myself as an artist, although I am, like, just kind of like compulsively attracted to art, right? And a true enthusiast of artistic endeavors, right? Like, you know,
astrologer in me is like, where's that in your chart?
Mercury and Pisces,
compulsively attracted to art, like addicted to art.
And you know, so that, and I don't feel alone in this. I've met countless people that share this kind of midway, you know, like existential, you know, personality, you know, like thing with me, which is you have all these ideas and you want them to be real, but they don't exist in one medium necessarily. Like, you know, like I never, you know, I was never, you know, just like the you know, the kind of artist that just is able to develop, right, like one path, you know, forward in sculpture or drawings. Like I did a bit of everything and enjoyed it very thoroughly, but, you know, but never mastered anything.
Putting the ama in amateur, right? The love of it, for the love of it.
Yes, that's a great one-line bio. For my background, yeah, absolutely. And so when this technology presented itself, you know, like some of my absolute favorite, you know, artifacts growing up were, and you know, I'm from Italy, so I just grew up around a lot of old stuff, you know,
unlike most Americans, right?
Well, like, yeah, perspectives, right? You know, I mean,
at least on the West Coast, I think our oldest things are what, from the 1850s, right? So we have no true concept of time in the way that you do when you do grow up around Roman walls, for example.
Harder to come by, for
it's
sure.
Hard,
yeah. They're not embedded in the geography at the very least.
Right.
And, or they are, but naturally, and it's a different thing, right?
It's a totally different kind of appreciation for human culture.
Yeah. Like if you're an archaeologist
It's
or
very much
geologist, I'm
based.
sure like you're having a blast up
Sure,
here,
yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
But anyway, so I, those old books,
Yes.
especially these hand bond old codexes and grimoires and like these meticulous works of friars and hermits and all of that, right? Super cool stuff. And I really loved thinking about those things. And in the 80s, there was an Italian architect actually that came up with this thing called the Codex Seraphinianus.
Okay.
You might have heard about it. It's becoming more popular now with reprints, I think. And the whole thing is just this giant, beautifully put together book written in an invented language about an invented reality. So it's an encyclopedia of a world that is completely made up,
right,
down to the language. But it's, it's got that, if you want to use a cultural reference to really understand how meticulous it is, it's very Wes Anderson in a sense, like it's got that
Umberto Eco, but
Eco
or Hayes kind of.
Eco's too much of a poet. No, like this is like this is an architect.
Okay.
That had like a very weird artistic intuition and was able to bring it to life, like with the most traditional of tools. Like everything is pencil drawings, color pencils, and right. But anyway, it looks like some of the most alive things I've ever seen. It's very much, like my thing, like I see something like that, like, oh man, I would love to do that myself. Right? And so then we get to the point where I start engaging with magic. I start reading the traditional texts. Right. And what I've noticed, and this was a frustration I shared with Nathan as we studied this stuff together, because as we started making talismans and, like, trying to figure out all this, like, okay, let's get a Dremel, right? So that we can like
carve on this really hard stone.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe we can carve
time's up, damn it.
Yeah, basically.
I gotta wait another 29 years to try again.
Totally. Maybe we can like order a custom stamp and hammer it down in one, whatever. But more than the technique, what we lamented the most was the lack of traditional sources that were visual. Because a lot of this stuff survived as a translation, but didn't survive as visual cues, or we don't even know if this was ever even
created.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know if there was like a parchment at some point that had
they were objects that might not have been collected, or that got lost, or that were in possession and no one knew what they were. So when the people died, they just buried them, or like
that's
like these little objects.
Yeah. That's in fact most definitely, because a lot of this stuff was made with wax, clay, paper. Exactly. I mean, there was
metal shields that could easily melt.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Right.
What if people actually destroyed them when they were done using them?
Possibly when, again, speaking of cultural shifts, right? I mean, like there had been countless times of, weird, cultural raids, right? Where, like certain things became outlawed by the current, church, right? Like ban lists or whatever. And that's like all of a sudden, if you were found in possession of pagan pendants or stuff like that, then maybe those got all melted down into some.
There could, like, we're all worried about the Library of Alexandria burning, but there could have been these like sustained,
we don't know,
destruction of talismanic reality.
It's very much survived as an ekphrasis thing, right? Everything is verbal descriptions.
What if there's an egregore of the talismanic tradition that wants you to have your own engagement with what it means to say, a woman holding a piece of paper in front of a chessboard? I'm thinking about a deacon of some kind. You know what I mean? Like that it doesn't want the image itself to be proliferated, but wants the interpretation to actually come from whatever you get in, like whatever gets it triggered in your own imagination as you read what the prompt is, just like the AI.
I think you're up to something. Yeah. I mean, like it certainly feels that way, right? That no matter how much you try to crystallize this stuff, it has a real tendency to not want to be crystallized.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, these images, you can hold up some of the cards. They change every time I look at them. Like every time I see one of the images you've created, it like shifts. Here's the altar card. I'm not sure if it's going to focus on it. Like I see new things in it each time. And it's really eerie because, you know, you think it's printed ink, it shouldn't change, but it does. It like has like these like unfixable parts of it. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, it's
Focus.
it's definitely a strange medium.
It's very wild.
Yeah, because there isn't like, I mean, the agency I've had over creating these images really is limited. You know, you can compare it, I guess, to making a collage, right? And then using very minimal painting, one could say, right, to kind of push some of the composition together, right? You know, so like if you had like, you know, if you cut out a head of something and cut out a body of something, and then it looked very, very collagey, you know, you might want to paint something around it, right? You know, to kind of make it look like one thing. And that's more or less what I did. So like all of the shapes and figures and the characters that emerged for each of these talismanic images were created exclusively in the AI, you know, model. And then I composed them in using digital painting, but that, again, very minimal interaction.
When you say compose them using digital painting, is that still prompting the AI or taking it into Photoshop to create a kind of montage?
Taking it into something like Photoshop, and yeah, like you know, aligning things in you know, putting them in certain spots, and you know, like having. So
you're not leaving it totally up to Midjourney. You're using Midjourney as a co-creator to create factors in the final image, but you are actually composing this final image.
Yeah. It's like, you know, it's asking for the right elements, and that's why I keep going back to the divination aspect of this, because it really, I culturally and anthropologically as a modern person, right, don't really know what it meant realistically to look into a black mirror and have the cultural references around me, right, like matching my expectations of what it means to look into a black mirror,
right?
You know, you do that now, you have to do a lot of work, right, to basically separate yourself first from this cultural layer, and then properly engage with this stuff in unexpected ways.
We look in black mirrors all the time. The thing is, we have to unlearn as I talk to people about astrology, for example, it's like we have to go back to a time when we saw light differently, because right now we're all used to these backlit LED screens. And if you're talking about what does it mean to look into a black mirror at a certain period of time, you have to like unlearn digital sight and relearn this other type of apprehension, and even learning how to see by candlelight differently.
Well, because you are actually, and that's a huge difference, you know, like I talk about this with my friends all the time about the difference between projecting a movie like from an actual film projector and looking at a screen. And the difference is obvious when you think about it, but not really, we don't really pay attention to that a lot. So the main difference is when you look at a projection, you are looking at something on the wall, right? You know, like the light is, yes, reflecting back to your eyes, but it's not projected into your eyes. Whereas with the screen, your eyes are the projection screen. So the retinas are the projection screen.
That's disturbingly phallic. And there's this thing that the ancient Greeks talked about around when we were talking about the sun and moon in astrology, for example. They rule the eyes, and they imagined that they cast rays out from the eyeball. And they've recently proven that we do that, and that we actually generate, just like when you have conception, the meeting of the sperm and egg creates a little flash of light. We actually do send out like protons. Kent Bai is my colleague who goes into this in one of his podcast episodes with VR headsets, that we're not just receiving light inside the eye, we actually cast it from the eye too. I don't know anything more complex than that, but this directionality you're speaking about really, like, I think is intense.
That's very key, I think, to explain why you know, people should be excited about utilizing text to image, specifically artificial intelligence models to create you know, and contribute to the culture of astrological magic, because it really is a two-way street. And in fact, it's so much so that it has to be to work. This isn't something that you can turn on and watch. It really isn't. You cannot just decide to, I mean, you can, I guess, to the degree that there are websites with AI images that you can look at. But I mean, that's hardly saying anything, right? You know, but to use Midjourney, you have to at least type something, and so that's actually it's quite cool when you think about it, because that isn't the same as turning on your TV.
Right.
And because, you know, I mean, like literally, you know, at this point, the technology is at the point where you turn something on and what we desire as consumers is something that takes care of itself, right? That sort of you press play and then an experience happens and then you can just passively consume it, which is fine.
Right.
But with this one, it really isn't the case. Like you have to put in some effort.
So when you would put in prompts for Midjourney, was there ever a time when Midjourney answered you with like a no or an I'm unplugged, or you thought you wanted this owl-shaped woman figure, but I'm just going to give you this like very spooky other thing in the middle of a scene you didn't actually describe here? Like the answer or the portal was answering you in this like tricky way? Did it spit back things that were not aligned with your prompts in order to like mess with you?
Countless times. And but
the trickster.
Yeah.
I think Mercury in Pisces is probably ideal for this journey.
Very much, actually. Like it turned out to be like the placement, you know.
So cool.
Because and I stand by this, like you know, the more I look at the, you know, the images that I that I put together, and then, you know, like, I mean, you really did a lot, you know, for me to even understand what I did, honestly, by crystallizing it in a book, because the images alone in a computer, I mean, they're cool and everything, and you can share them with people, and that's fine. But yeah, I don't know, there is still like they have a sense of instability to them if they're not collected and presented. And so I actually think, again, you know, like we were talking about, you know, how do you go about finding ways to strike a balance, you know, between the inanimate and the animate, the physical and the digital, all those things. And I mean, this book very much did that for me. Like, I'm, you know, not saying that this is like a philosophical answer to any of these problems, but personally, I found it very very satisfying and very clear.
They're moving
to have done all of this in a space that's not physical, and having it, you know, like presented in a physical form is really cool. Because and back to your question, the thing that I lamented the most studying astrological magic was a lack of physical imagery, specifically, if nothing else, for you know, for personal inspiration, right? You know, because even if you find a way to, like, you know, make the talismans really quickly, and you develop a style that's synthetic enough to do that, you still, we take it for granted that people know how to imagine things, and that really, and I don't mean that, you know, like that's a good thing or a bad thing, you know, but it really is true that not everyone is visual, you know, and so if you are a visual person, I think it's just, you just take it for granted. You know, when you think of stuff all the time visually, you talk to someone and you are a visual person and you're communicating these things, taking it for granted that the person in front of you is gonna have the same resolution of you know, like imaginific rendition of what you're saying, but that isn't necessarily the case. And so this technology not only presents that solution and bridges some of that gap, like from you know, like from person to person, when it comes to like, I imagine this and here's a real image that does that for you, but it does that in the context of, okay, this is not enough for me to like summon like a deep magical symbol, you know. And again, and the reason probably is that at the time during which those talismans were like popular and being made on a daily basis, there was this collective idea of what a woman sitting in a throne with a hand above her head, right, meant. And it probably meant something really specific for the time that we obviously don't have a real relationship to anymore. And if we do, it's academic. And so it's mediated by all kinds of biases, you know, that we can't really say are experiential necessarily.
But when you say that, that makes me think of current marketing and branding and logos. And so like, those are our current talismans in a way. Like we know what those mean.
Yes.
The Nike swoosh, for example,
or
whatever.
Oh,
like
goodness.
that's the classic go-to. But a lot of other logos become these kind of talismanic phonemes that echo throughout, so that you can see certain people's affiliations. I mean, even cars are branded, so you're like, oh, that's a Saturn. I actually was thinking about, what if someone was driving a yellow Saturn? Wouldn't that be like the perfect alchemy car? You know, Anyway, so like, you know, we have these images that have become our version of that, but we're disconnected from the talismanic potential, perhaps.
That specific talismanic potential,
yeah,
right? You know, because it's not like we aren't affected by talismans today.
Yeah.
It's just we're not affected by those talismans,
right.
You know, but there's a reason why those instructions have survived is that, you know, just like you said before, they have a desire of their own,
right,
to be manifested, to be created, to be brought forth.
But what if they also had a desire to hide for a while?
And that's fine. I'm guessing that's not the case,
Okay.
because the book is here, right? You know, so it's like, I hope that's
maybe
not
they
the case, because
Midjourney to spill back out.
Yeah,
you know, but they had to bypass the 20th century. You know, like get away.
I really believe that. I mean, like it feels, it feels like there is a plethora of entities that have not found a proper mean of communication with humans that have acquired, right, these this new and unexpected perspective on the cosmos. And that's very true, right? You know, you discover these things, you grow knowledge in infinite directions, and that doesn't get rid of the entities. It's not like because you discover science that you know the gods and the spirits cease to exist simply because we have discovered a new system of
pretended to kill them in the 19th century.
Whatever, yeah, you know, there's countless stories, I guess, that you can like choose, you know, for that to happen. But I don't think we've gotten rid of anything.
No.
Everything is still there, and it's very much eager to present itself and to do things, you know, to act and behave and be animated. And so if this feels like a convergence of sorts. I don't obviously have any of the answers in my hands, but I do have a piece of experience, thanks to you, to present to people and let them play with it, first of all, which is really exciting. You can take the book, rip pages off of it.
Or we deconstructed the book into cards.
So you
can just have it already unfolded like this, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, the cards are really cool. Like oh my God. That was another thing, obviously, you know, just like if you engage with any of the astrological communities, I mean, you know, like altar design feels like very central. That guy.
It's like, oh my God. Coming out of the AI.
Mr. Southern rule.
Do not mess with him.
Decan.
Very cool. Yeah. And they're huge also, because I found that when I'm printing an AI image, because the inks tend to change every time you look at them, I wanted something bigger. I didn't want to make a little deck like everybody was making tarot decks these days. That was not the right format. I felt like it was necessary to have something that you could genuinely like look at, like a family photo or something, or like frame and put up, you know, like that was big enough to stare at and be like, oh my God, I never saw that before. And I don't know how they do it, but they do change. It's the weirdest thing.
I mean, if nothing, I mean, I think it's a real thing of, I mean, especially those images which were made with these early versions of Midjourney, which again, like a lot of it is noise, like really a lot of it is noise. And it's just a joy, like personally, like I'm talking like just personally to have that kind of sensitivity for imagery and just being able to have this little court of shapes and colors that you fundamentally like overlay meaning to. Like none of this is inherently clear, you know, but
to the machine itself,
certainly not to the machine, let alone to us, you know, like when it presents itself. And so to collage that stuff together is just a lot of fun. And you know, and then you have this thing that you know keep looking at it, it's like, wait a second, like, you know, because mountains are only mountains if you decide they're mountains, but you know, they can be all kinds of other things and shapes and things. And so for a spiritual practice and, you know, as an altar piece, I think the medium really can do a lot, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's amazing too to see how there's already a nostalgia forming for something that really was such a small period of time between Midjourney 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we have this very clean 5, and the uncanny valley seems to be shrinking. We're colonizing it. And it's like, I'm already nostalgic for Midjourney 3. Like, don't use 5, go back to 3. That was good. But that makes me also think of like countries that don't exist anymore. Like East Germany was really awesome culturally. They had like a really not so nice societal structure in certain ways, but they also had elements that were very precious and cool, and like cultural forms that were very unique to it. And then when it ended, it was only 40 years of existence. And when it ended, then suddenly all of this cultural production just ceased to be. And so now we can only mimic something, right? And so it's like nostalgia for other people's nostalgia of this time. And so Midjourney 3 is almost like this country that doesn't exist anymore to me,
Certainly not because again, man.
It learned too much. It got too smart and like accurate.
Well, there's that, and there's like, it's weird because like really like we got into Midjourney like very early. Like I mean, we must have been some of the first 10,000 people that were let into this, because at the beginning it was like as they were gaining traction and experimenting with it, they had a rather limited computing power.
So they couldn't just let all these people in.
You couldn't just have millions of, right now. I mean, they have, it must be the largest Discord, some of the largest, users in one place, at least in Discord.
It makes sense then why you have to pay for fast hours, because you're actually literally buying.
Correct. Yeah. Now everything is subscription model, but back then it was free and it was beta, right? So you had to wait. Everyone was waiting for the magic invitation email, and then some of us would get it, be like, oh, you got the invitation. And then I got the invitation, and yeah, I mean, it was like, this all started because I just wanted to see what happened if I asked it to do a medieval style print.
Yeah.
Like one of those like bizarre, like kind of like
illuminated manuscript kind of thing.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. Like an ink, like one of those like mysterious ink, illustrations on an old book. And I just happened, at the time I was reading about, like the decans, which were particularly bizarre. Right?
Yeah,
they're
weird.
Let me see what happens if I, try it. And then, I mean, the result was just so exciting that, that I had to keep going. To wrap it up, I guess we can just end on the codex pages.
Yeah.
And the process with that that I think is worth mentioning is that the cool thing about the images is that there's a degree of control that I would that I had over it. But stuff like this is a one shot generation. And
wow. So no collaging
whatsoever. And that was even more exciting to me because you take the images and you take the shapes and you take the colors, and again, so if you have like some artistic sensitivity, then you do the art thing, right? You follow the rules of aesthetics, or you use personal preference to put things in certain places. But I wanted, like, the more I did that, the less control I wanted to have, basically, because again, like you really get excited about this idea of like divining something out of it, and the more you do it, the more surprised you want to be, and it's, I gotta tell you, it's easy to get like too used to it. Like it really, like if you do it constantly, it becomes harder and harder to be surprised by the uncanny valley like element of it, because you start being able to spot all of the like patterns and the things you're like, oh yeah, I know that very well, like I've seen that countless times.
Well, here's a question for you actually before you keep going, is that did you notice things getting redder as you would keep going, or did you not iterate a certain image enough for the redness to start?
You mean
because if you recast an image in Midjourney too much, at least when I was working with it, it would start to like darken, and it would go into this like reddish thing. Like everything would become shades of red in some way.
I think I know what you mean. I don't know if my experience was like red, but there is such thing as basically like these models learn. And so, but they can very easily learn too much. And so that might be basically like there's a lot of artifacts of learning too much and getting fixated on one thing that basically is going to keep presenting itself more and more until it's going to break the image. Midjourney doesn't do that. But if you do it yourself, like if you're running the model locally and you're like running experiments very discreetly, you can really see how much an image can break back into noise. And so everything in between is the sweet spot that's going to give you an image.
Got it.
But on the on either side is just this crazy nebula of, you know, because color I think is one of the strongest things that the model understands. Like that's a very clear coordinate for the neural network to work around. And so yeah, if you're not careful, say if you keep saying apple, you know, or whatever, like something like that, you know, like if it's finding most apple images to be red, it's gonna just start injecting that with that, because you're stressing the apple thing, but really what you're stressing is round thing that's red,
right,
or something like that, you know.
Almost like pulling too many tarot cards, like just break up already, right? Like how many more cards do you need to pull? Like it's red. No. Okay.
That would be such a great prank for like metaphysical people. Like just give them a deck that only has the hermit in it, and they're like thinking, just shuffling it, and like
that's rude.
Wow, you really are attracted to this card.
Tower. No. I think there is a tower deck though. I think someone on Kickstarter did that.
That makes sense, dude. That makes so much sense.
All right. Well, I just want to actually ask everybody who's here, if you have questions for Arturo, now is your time to ask. You may turn on your mic and your screen.
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say this is really cool. I really love like the AI art stuff, and it's really interesting to me, like the stuff that you've been able to do. So I look forward to like seeing what happens over the next couple of months and like years with like how this stuff progresses.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's gonna be really exciting. It's only gonna, I mean, we really have no idea about the possibilities.
Well, you're still doing more. What are you working on now? How has this iterated for you?
Right now, I am working on more detailed and complex versions of the codex pages. Well, I mean, on an unrelated subject, I am using it for work, actually, to do things that are related to different aspects of film production. So, you know, using it for storyboarding, using it for visualization of certain concepts, and even you know, like turning footage into other things. And you know, like, because you know, we have only been talking about text to image,
right? But
you can take images as the initial noise and then start from there. So you can like feed it an image and then tell it to turn into other things. And so the great thing about having a bit of a portfolio basically now of images that were collages of the AI, and then so now I have a collection of 86 paintings that I can say blend together, or use as like, you know, the initial noise, and do like variations on the theme and create new things. So, you know, like that, like ever since I finished that, the velocity at which like the tech has evolved has been like very exponential.
Meaning the tech itself without your images being physical, or your ability to use the physical image to push the tech? Oh,
just the amount of tools that's being that are coming out, and the models updating, and all that is gone, like, you know, I mean, it's gone really fast. And you know, like, so I'm also kind of in a phase where I'm looking at all the options and see what's even possible. Like, I mean, truly, you know, so little was in your control when I was done with those. I mean, really, Midjourney was pretty much the best thing available, you know. And then there was this other thing called Stable Diffusion, which was very cool and open source. And so that was the main appeal, is that people can, with Midjourney, you don't have access to the actual model, right? Like, all you can do is prompt and do little tweaks and things. But with Stable Diffusion, you can very much fine tune things, but the model itself just didn't have that secret sauce and that power, that weird visual power. And that's it. You know, the other thing about Midjourney is like Midjourney really does have a haunted quality to its generations that other models don't. And so that one is just very clearly an arena for all of these explorations to happen, that I think is going to remain that. But then there's all these other things you can do. So you mentioned tarot decks. And so now, for example, you have the option to rig up something like a mannequin, for example, and to have the image you generate to be to be appearing in that very pose.
Mm.
And so for Tarot, that's going to be like, that's something I'm looking at and I'm very excited about, because so much of the Tarot tradition revolves around these hermetic symbology in the poses of the characters. And, you know, like the wizard being like one of the classic ones, right? Where like the position of his arms makes the shape of the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet,
right,
and so on. And so to be able to retain some of that, but then to still have the crazy, you know, like AI, you know, like chaotic, you know, divination happen around it, stuff like that. So I'm in an exploratory phase.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, we're about at time. Thanks everybody for coming today. And thank you for also being our first on-site guest.
It's so exciting.
It's so awesome to have you in this space. And I hope the astrological ancestors weren't too loud around you. I'm always inundated with like the amount of books talking at each other while we're speaking. Yeah. And if you liked this, please get involved with the Oracle of Delphi, Arturo's book, and also the card deck, which is available at Revelor Press, revelor.press. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody.